Hi, we're going to look at how to make a Blackboard test or quiz today. So starting off over here, we've got what you normally see when you log into Blackboard. I'm going to choose a course that I actually taught last semester, just so I don't confuse students. So I'm going to go into that course. What you'll see when I log into this course is the home page. In my homepage, I have some customized items on my menu. That's are actually very easy to make. You just come over here and you say plus, and you can add different things. You can add menus like content areas, module pages, blank pages. You can read more about these or ask me if you're interested in them. For our purposes, let's just call this a content area. We might call this content area tests, for example. It may have other names that show up as you try to do this. I could make this available to users, but since I'm not sure that they're ready to see this yet, I'm not going to. I'm just going to say submit, and then we'll have this not available to users, and we can make it available when we're ready. So now I'm going to go into this area, and what we can see in this area is that there's nothing in it. And so what we'd like to do is add a test. So we're going to add a test. And so far, I don't have any tests that I want to use, but I did write a previous test that I called test 1. And if I knew what that test was, I could add this test to my bank of tests, and then maybe I could assign it to the students. But since I don't want to use that one, I want to create a new one, I'm going to create a new test right now. And as you create tests, they'll get saved in your test banks so that you could use them again in the future, for example. Or if you export this and import this to a new class, let's say next semester or beyond, you could reuse these tests as well. So, test information. What should we call this test? Let's call it midterm test. Midterm. And then we could add a description and we can add instructions, but I'm not going to do that right now because I'm not sure that I know what the instructions or the description is going to be, because I'm doing this on the fly here. So I'll just come back and change it as I need to. We'll just say submit and get started. Now, when you are in something called the test canvas, what you can do is create, reuse, or upload questions. If someone has questions that they have created for you for Blackboard, for example, a test book company, for example, you should be able to upload them directly by doing something like finding the file that you downloaded the questions for. These would be specific for Blackboard. You have to be very careful that they're formatted in the proper way. And so if you're interested in doing that, you should contact the textbook company or the person providing the questions for you. But in my case, I don't have these, so I'm not going to do this. Rather, what I'd like to do, I could try to find questions, for example. But since I don't have any questions made yet, I'm not going to be able to find any. So I'm going to start off with creating a question. There's all sorts of different questions that you can create. I think the simplest one to start with is multiple choice. Multiple choice is a very simple question, right? You have a number of options and there's only one that is correct. That's the only way that multiple choice works on our Blackboard site. So if you can write your questions this way, perfect. You'll say multiple choice, and now you'll have a question title. I have a number of different questions here, but we'll say a question might be, where do you live, right? And that might be the name. So the question title should be descriptive. If it's the same as the question test, that's fine. But maybe we may make this text a little bit more specific and can say something like, what state is LaGuardia Community College? Because we might have some students from New Jersey or Connecticut. What state is LaGuardia Community College located? Okay. And now I'm going to add some options here. So first, I have to decide how to number, if I want to number, or orient the question. So I want them in a column or row. I don't really think that's important right now. I could allow for partial credit. If I allow for partial credit, that means that if the person gets it wrong, they get to try again, which is fine if you want to do that. Or you can say, no, it's either you get it right or you don't. I love to show the answers in random order. This just prevents people from cheating very, very simply. You still, if you get the same question, you'll have the same answers, and the correct answer will be the same, but you can't just look and see the order and pass them back and forth. All right, number of answers that we're going to choose. So let's choose the correct answer first, which is New York, and then let's give some incorrect answers. New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania. So here's our different options here. And since we have the correct one indicated, we're all good. And we could give some response feedback if we wanted to. Correct response feedback. You got it. Incorrect response feedback. If we were going to allow them to try again, we could say try again here. In this case, since we didn't allow for partial credit, we'd say, oops, the correct answer was New York. And that would tell them what the correct answer was, for example, if that was something you wanted to do. That's not always what you want to do. And you don't have to include correct response or incorrect response feedback. That's not necessary. It's just to show that you can do this. As you start to add more and more questions and create more and more, you can have different categories, topics, levels of difficulties, and even keywords that you can search through these question banks. This becomes more important when you do bigger developments. Since we're doing things on the fly right here, probably not important. You could add some notes if you need to. Here's our first question, and we're going to submit. You could also submit and create another if you wanted to just keep going, but I just want to see what happens when I submit. So here's the first question. It says, in what state is LaGuardia Community College located? The answer is New York. And you can see that the other ones are not indicated. There's only one right answer. All right, so that's one. But what if you wanted to ask a question that had more than one right answer? You've got to be careful here. If you want the students to answer more than one right answer, you have to be clear that they should answer all of the correct questions, answers, not just one. That's called a multiple answer. So in other words, if I come over here and I choose a multiple answer type of question, that means there's going to be more than one. Sometimes there's only one, but sometimes there'll be more than one correct answer. And you want to tell the students that they have to choose all of the correct answers. If they miss any of them, they get the question wrong. This can be confusing for students. And so this is a perfectly fine format, but because it's confusing for students, I sometimes recommend using this with care. Only if you really have this format down and the students really understand it is it a good one. But there are some other great options here. The multiple choice, of course, is self-scored, so that makes it really nice. If you have very particular kinds of questions that can be calculated with a number, and you think the students can write the proper number in without getting it incorrect, you can do something called calculated numeric, right? Calculated numeric might be, make this question title addition, and then we'll say, what is 1 plus 1? And the answer is 2. You could have an answer range if you wanted to. So I could say, oh, well, maybe they don't know, or maybe it's plus or minus 0.1 or something like that. It's a very silly thing for us to do with this question, but there are options where you might have different ranges that students might come up with. And then you can give feedback if you'd like, just like before. But let's see if we add this, submit, what it looks like in the test. So this is the calculated numeric question, addition, what is 1 plus 1? The correct answer is 2. There is no possible range. They have to get it exactly right. And if they enter it incorrectly, they get it right. What's another possible question I could create? I could create a true-false sort of question, very similar to multiple choice, except there's only 2 responses, true or false. You could also do things like matching. That's a little bit, it's self-explanatory in terms of what you do. You match one side with another side, but I'm not going to get into that. If you're interested in doing matching questions, you can contact me. I think some of the other ones that are perhaps more interesting to some people would be something like an essay question. Right? If I add an essay question, I might say, tell me your day. I'm going to make that the question title. And then I'm going to say, tell me about your day. And then the answer, you could provide an answer to correct of a correct response. So my day was fairly good. Right? That's an example of a correct response. If you have a way of scoring these essay questions where you're looking at different options, you could develop something called a rubric. I'm not going to get into that. If you are interested, I might start a whole other section on building rubrics. But this is a way to sort of quickly automate the grading process, because if you do an essay question, you have to go through and read all the essays that are written by all the students. So it's something to keep in mind. And then you could add some notes if you want, but I can just submit this right now as an essay question, right? My third question is essay, tell me about your day. Another type of question that I really like is something called the file response. This is a type of question that you could ask where you ask someone to upload a picture of themselves, right? For example, or a picture of something that they did, right? Maybe you want them to keep some evidence of the work they were doing. So take a picture of yourself, right? And then you could add a rubric if you wanted to, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to submit this one. And what the students will see when they take this test and they get here is that they will see that they can upload something from their phone or from their computer to answer the question. They could upload a document, they could upload a picture. Hopefully they'll upload something that answers the question correctly. Again, you'll have to look at each of those file responses in order to grade them, but this is another possible question. So I was going to just look at those 4 possible questions, right? And so now that I'm done with these 4 questions on my test, you'll notice that they've been given automatic point values of 10 each. You don't have to stick with that. You can change them around if you want. You can make some worth more, some worth less. You can change what the number of points default they're out of, but this is a good starting situation. Now I'm going to say, okay. So now I've come back to this create test scenario here, and since I just created this new test I call midterm, this is the test that I want to add to my menu. So I'm going to add this midterm test that I just created to my menu, not test 1, but midterm, and then I'm going to say submit. Now I get to do some interesting things about asking some questions about how the students are going to take the test. So the name of the test is midterm. I can give a description to it. So I might say something like, this is your midterm test. Do I want to open it in a new window? You could if you wanted to. That sometimes eliminates some of the distractions. You don't have to if you don't want to. Then you have to decide whether you want to make it available to the students, add an announcement. If you add an announcement, it'll sort of blast all the students on email, which is can be kind of nice. I'm not going to make this available or add an announcement right now since I don't want to bother the students that were in my class last semester. Do you want to allow for multiple attempts? You could if you'd like, right? You could have the students take it once. If they didn't like it, they could try to take it again. This is especially good for practice tests. You could allow even unlimited attempts in that situation. It's all sort of up to you. How do you want to score attempts if you use multiple attempts? You could use the last graded attempt, the highest grade, the lowest grade, the first graded attempt, right? First graded attempt is kind of fun if you use multiple attempts because that means they get graded the first time they go through, but then they can try again and continue to try it until they get the right answer. Be careful, that can provoke cheating, right? Because one student just takes the hit, figures out what all the correct answers are, and then shares it with the other ones. But if it's a practice, you can sort of do these sorts of things. Or if you can guarantee that all the students are taking it at the same time, that's one thing you can do. So I'm going to turn off multiple attempts. Forced completion just means that the student has to finish the test when they start it. This is a little bit awkward because if students have technology problems, this will be an issue if you force completion. I would recommend against doing it, but it is an option. You can also set a timer. How long should it take for the students to be able to do this? Again, in a situation where they're doing it in a classroom, this makes a little bit more sense than what we're dealing with right now. I would recommend instead of a timer, just having a due date and just having the students finish it by that due date. But you have a timer option available if you want. Now, you can display after a certain time. This would mean if you click this, you could wait to display this. Let's say I didn't want the students to know about the test until next week. I could do something like this. But if I don't click this, the test will become available immediately. If I say display until, this is a way of setting the due date, right? So if I say I want them to finish the test by tomorrow, I might put something like this. And another thing that you can do to prevent cheating is you can have a password for the test. So if you add a password for the test, right? This is the password I'm going to use. Not a great password, but it's an okay one. Then students won't be able to access the test until they ask you for what the password is. So this is actually a neat way that you can control who's taking the test and when. Because once the students have the password, they can start taking the test, but it's not until they have that password that they can. This is another way of making sure that students connect with you so that you are on the same page. It depends on what your feelings are about this. If you want to encourage more communication, this is fine. but this can also become a problem if students lose connectivity or something like this. They might forget what the password is, et cetera, et cetera. So this is kind of up to you. I kind of would recommend against using it in the situation we're doing right now. You could change who might be able to see the test. You could have different groups, and you could have different tests for different groups if you want to. This is a little bit more advanced. If you're interested, let me know. But most importantly here, you might have this due date, right? This due date here is going to be associated, you might want to be careful with the display until. You don't want the due date to be after the display until, because otherwise the students will lose their connectivity to the test. But I can say that the due date is the same date and time as when the display until is. I guess I have to advance this by 2 minutes, right? But if I do this, that means that it'll be finished, it will stop displaying, and it will be due at exactly this time. And then I can say, do not allow students to start the test if the due date has passed, for example. If this is important to you, you can add this functionality. I would recommend against this just because there may be students that run into problems and you may want to give exceptions, and it becomes a little bit easier if you do allow the students to continue to start the test afterwards. Then you can make the exceptions as you go through the grading. You can either, if you do allow it, then submissions that are accepted that are marked late, and you can warn the students that late submissions may be subject to penalty, which might be a little bit easier to handle than just locking them out entirely. You can include this in the grade score calculations. I think that's a good thing. Maybe we'll have a discussion about grade books later. And then you can also hide the results for this test. This is a feature that I don't understand why you'd want to use, but you might want to do this, I suppose, if you wanted to have a test available for students, but they were embarrassed to try things, I suppose. So show results and feedback to the students after submission seems like the correct answer, but there's other things that you can do. You can have these feedback after the due date, right? If you want to tell them what all the right answers are afterwards. After attempts are graded, after the availability of the end date, something like this. There's all sorts of ways that you can think about giving feedback, and then you should think about what's the best for you. Or you can also do it on a particular date when you give this feedback. Now, test presentation. Do you want the students to see the entire test at once? Do you want them to see one question at a time? Do you want them to not be able to go back once they get right answers? And do you want to have the questions randomized? These are all things that you have to decide. Once you have decided, boom, you submit, and now you've got a test that's here. Now this test is hidden from the students because I didn't make it available. If I wanted to make it available, I could come in here and say make available, and then the students would have it available and they'd be able to take the test. So let me make it quickly available here, and we'll see what it looks like from the perspective of a student who take this test. I'm going to enter something called student preview. We're going to come in here and we're going to see, so this is always good to check. So the students actually can't see this test right now because it's on a menu item that I didn't make available to them. So in order to make the menu item available, I have to exit student preview. And I'm going to come here, and now I'm going to make this menu item available. So we're going to show the link, right? And now I'm going to enter the student preview again. Come in here, and we'll go into test, right? This is what the student sees when they take the test, when they take the midterm. So it says the test can be saved and resumed later. This test is due on this point. I didn't put any descriptions or instructions in there. I would have to edit the test to add that, but I could if I wanted to do that. So I'm going to say begin and see what this test looks like. Right, so this test looks like this. Tell me about your day. Was a good day. And now the student, in order to move on, you'd have to move on like this, and it says moving to another question will save this response. So I'm going to say, okay, good. And we'll go to the next question. It says take a picture of yourself. So I might browse my computer, find a picture of myself. This is not a picture of myself, but I'll just use this as a picture. And I'll say, okay, great. This is the picture of myself. Next. All right. And now it says, what state is LaGuardia Community College located in? Oh, I guess I'll say New Jersey. What's going to happen if I say that? I'll probably get it wrong, but whatever. And now, what is 1 + 1? Well, let's just say 2. Okay. And now I'm saving and submitting. And I'm going to say OK. And here we go. So now I can click OK to review the results, right? And so it says like this, like this. It says 0 out of 10 because I didn't get this right. 1 plus 1, I got that one correct. So I've gone through and looked at all of it. This is giving you a sense for kind of how a student might experience a test. So I'm going to exit the preview right now. And that's just a quick little demonstration for how we might do some tests, or how we might add some quick little quizzes, for example, to Blackboard. So I hope that was very helpful, and I wish you all the best. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know.